sure about that.
No, there you are. I see you. I see you coming through just right. Yeah, with that beautiful, cloudy Brooklyn sky behind you.
Not
Actually,
exactly.
it's Chicago sky.
Chicago sky. Oh my God. And here I thought I was going to finally have some fellow New Yorkers on the show.
Well, we're still technically New Yorkers.
Yeah, but not for long.
But not for long.
Not for long. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to become Chicago natives permanently? Is that what's going to be happening?
Nothing is
I don't
permanent
know.
in indie
We'll
development.
see. But I gotta say, it's great getting like a space that's double the size of your apartment for half the rent.
Oh, don't rub it in. Come on. now you're just making me self-conscious.
Hey, I live in San Francisco, okay? I win.
You do.
Oh,
Yeah, it's true. You do. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do this little station ident once again. We are playing Mushroom 11. This is how it's done. Games Radar's weekly developer talk show here on Twitch, and we are joined by the lovely creators of this game, Itay and Julia Karen, whose names I hope to God I just pronounced correctly. Please tell me I'm saying your names right.
You got everything correctly, even Julia.
Yeah! Yeah! This is a first. This is the first time ever, anybody, that I have managed.
It's Julia, actually.
It's Julia. Damn it! I knew it. I knew it the entire time. Now, you guys have made this wonderful game, which Ludwig and I have. You know, there seems to be an impulse to describe Mushroom 11 as a platformer, but I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to talk about it. Like Ludwig said, that it's a game that's about traversal and momentum, which, I mean, most platformers are, but my God, you've made something strange here. This is the first time I've played it, and I am already just beguiled by this thing. It is so strange, but also just, like, wonderful right out the gate.
Thanks.
Where did this come from? How did you guys come to this? I know you worked on it for a very, very long time, but where did the initial kernel of the idea start?
So it started in Global Game Jam 4 years ago. So Global Game Jam is this event that happens every year where you have 48 hours to make a game based on a theme that's given to everybody around the world. And the theme was the snake eating its tail. That's a symbol. It's called the Ouroboros. Mm-hmm. And what I really wanted to do when I saw this this symbol, what I really saw is an opportunity to make a game that's based on destruction rather than effective motion, like direct motion. And since I love platformers, and I felt like this would be the perfect opportunity to make something that's like looking at the negative space as the actual control. So I had a couple of ideas of what to do, how to approach it, but as soon as I started putting, very crude set of cubes, and then when you start removing those cubes, other cubes start developing and growing, and always complement the original number of cells. There was something magical happening there. It was very clunky and not a lot of fun to begin with, but it was very clear that something interesting is happening there. And the idea to take it to like a more of a puzzle that happens on a platformer scenery or something like that. It's just like it didn't really fit any of the standard genre types, and we're very happy with it. And sometimes it's very, very hard to explain what the game really is, and it's true. Even the word platformer, even a puzzle platformer, doesn't really explain very well.
No, it's very difficult to describe though. The impulse to use that familiar language so that people who play video games will be like, oh, I get a platformer, I want to try that. I understand the want to put it into familiar terms, but even when you play it, like, not a whole lot about this is familiar in any way. It's hard.
We tried to get good descriptions from playtesters, and the best one was like, it's like massaging a cloud. But I can't really pitch like, what's your game about? Well, it's like massaging a cloud. Like,
I think it's pretty much accurate, actually. But it's really hard, and in fact, we noticed that people who don't really understand or don't think they know how to play the game actually get the hang of it even faster than your typical platformer enthusiasts or gamer types.
Because they're not coming with that vocabulary of, this is a platformer, so therefore I should have agency in these categories.
Right.
So different.
Just even explaining the very basics of like not being able to jump when you see a platform it's very hard to have this negative or reverse learning. The things that you think you have control, the lack of control is the very, very basic set of motions that you're supplied with.
So at the very beginning of the show, Ludwig and I were talking about how, the vast majority of the time somebody makes a game, whether or not it's sort of about environmental manipulation, any type of game, the character that you're going to control is going to be some kind of biped. It's going to be something that we look at and traditionally think of as being alive, and probably going to be a person or a small animal with a happy little face, something with two legs that walks. And in my head, I think to myself, well, sure, that's an easy way to translate to somebody how they're going to need to move or how to manipulate something that isn't necessarily in the real world. But like, why do you guys think that there aren't more games that sort of, why don't more designers start where you guys started, in thinking about trying something very, very different and having something that you're manipulating on screen that isn't necessarily human or recognizable as something that you could actually touch in the physical world?
Honestly, this is actually a very key question that we haven't really thought about recently, because we're used to how the game looks like right now. But going back 4 years to the beginning of the design, I remember having a lot of conversation with Julia and with our artist Simon Kono, and the idea was that it kept coming up over and over again, the fact that this thing has no face, so how will it look like? Where do we put the eyes? And the idea of like, no, there are no eyes, there is no you, that is there is no individual between all the different cells. The different cells are this composite of this amorphous being that is you, but in a very non-human you. So it was a very, very hard thing to understand, and the reason why other designers don't really look at it as, I think it's just like we were.
I think it started with the mechanic. Like the mechanic, when we came up with the prototype, it was really clear that none of these cells were more important than any other cell. And I think when we were designing it just sort of, everything kind of fit around the mechanic so nicely. And I think what drew me and Simon as well into this project was that it had such a different, it challenged players in such a different way. And part of that is like, you're not, it's really hard to latch on or get attached to something that's just so foreign. But it's also really challenging because you don't have any direct control. And I one of the things that I really liked when we were first starting to play test the game was that people were so attached to every single cell. Like the concept that you had to sacrifice like a huge chunk of yourself really resonated with players, and that was something that was really interesting. Also with just in terms of like the story, the environment, and everything around it, of something we wanted players to recognize is like there is this sort of unimportance to everything, like in life, like we're all gonna die, like all these like kind of morbid things just sort of happen in this really interesting way. But it's at the same time, like one hand it's morbid and the other hand it's like really beautiful, because it's like, life is gonna like continue on, like you can lose half of yourself and all you need is this one small cell and everything will go back to normal. And so that was like really a beautiful moment. So it was really hard, and I think it is still really hard for people to wrap their heads around like how to navigate and also how to get attached to something like this, because you're not necessarily like, even if it's an animal, like you have a face, you have a familiarity, even if it's a plant that's kind of recognizable, like because you're like this fungus thing, like that's like much harder to get attached to.
Yeah, I mean, Julia, like I am drawn, like when I think about it intellectually, I'm drawn to the idea of a character that's very alien. But like I have trouble, in when I'm actually playing something, connecting to it, like, well, anyone does. Like you said, like it's a real challenge. Like when you don't have a face, it's hard to not get emotionally drawn to it. But like, so as you guys were thinking about that, how did you start to think about imbuing all of the cells, your little multicellular blob, with soul? How did you give it a personality?
So here's the thing. It's actually something that I think the very core of the mechanics was based on the decision that was not immediate, but the decision to have a limited number of cells, no more and no less. You remove cells, they grow, but it never grows more than that limited amount of cells. And it always looks different. It could be cut to different number of pieces. But you always kind of have the same footprint on the screen, on the scene. And it is very fast after you start playing and after you understand, the fact that you can destroy your own cells and then they grow, you understand that there's some sort of unity between the player and this thing, because you have to take care of all those cells. You need to. There's something that you can identify with, And some of the first prototypes were to have this thing grow indefinitely, or just changing the number of cells so it grows smaller and then bigger and smaller and bigger. And it was very clear that, like, okay, that's completely random. There's no identification between me as the player and this creature. But once that creature had a set size, for that matter, it had a soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, completely. Was there, when you first were developing the idea, back when you came out of this game jam thinking like, oh, there's something to this, was there a moment where you were going to start thinking about it like in terms of growth? Because I can imagine that the temptation to make this a game about like adding to your mass and constantly expanding was very tempting. Like that's another idea that I think people would automatically sort of get, is that oh, well, you're consuming space and adding to your cell blob.
So yeah, the idea of like trying a bunch of different mechanics like the Katamari, the Damashis, the idea of growing as you consume, and then reducing as you destroy yourself. That is actually one of the first things that just trying to figure out the emotion, the cycle of what's happening with the game, growing and shrinking back. That felt, oh, I got this. This is so easy. Now I have this energy cycle. You consume, you get bigger, you destroy. 5 minutes after I implemented this thing, it's like, okay, this is not fun. This is not it. The one thing you really wanted to do in this game is just play with it. Play with it without consequences. Just see what happens. That's like the mechanics kind of dictated the idea of like, there is no consequences, there is no energy, and you can never destroy this thing. That's it. It's there, and it's there forever. Okay, and I'm not even.
I mean, you could destroy it by like falling into pits of lava.
Yeah, but then it grows back from the last, like
but
the spawn point.
When we made the change, it was really clear that like the size, I don't know, it was really important to have a good size in order to make it feel good, and changing that size made it unfun, because if it was too big, it would either be, the puzzles would either be too easy or it would just be too cumbersome. You have all these pieces you have to keep deleting, and then they would be regrowing, and it would just be kind of, it would either be kind of like dull or cumbersome. And then if it was too small, everything would be much harder because you have less mass to control or less mass to work with when you're building.
Or even the number of cells.
And keeping it consistent really helps players understand kind of what you can do with this thing. Constantly changing it takes that away.
Hello, Legitimate Simon. Hello, everybody in the chat. If you are just joining us, welcome to How It's Done, Games Radar's weekly developer talk show. We are talking to Itay and Julia Karen, the creators of Mushroom 11, the game which I am failing at spectacularly at exactly this
You're
moment.
not alone.
Man, so like you're just talking about like managing to capture that feeling of like what feels good in this game, what feels right, and making sure that this cellular thing is contained and is just, it's always there. That's what feels good. And it's remarkable for me to see each little new thing in here sort of bear that out. I only just got to the point in the game where there was poison. And like, it's purple. You automatically see purple and you're like, it's going to be poison. But man, like, the moment it touched me and it started to just rot away, I was like, oh God, and I immediately got it. Immediately. And it felt just right. How...
You have to amputate.
You have to amputate. You got to cut it out. Get rid of that cancer. How do you go about that iterative process of making sure it feels good? How do you leave yourself open to, how do you keep yourself from clinging to an idea that you think is the right one, even when it might not be?
Taking it to a lot of shows and having people play it.
But more than that, actually, we might have a connection problem.
Oh,
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So just recently, I mean, this is kind of like kind of an undisclosed secret of like this deleted scenes kind of thing. I put in a new feature. It was really, really, really interesting on paper. It's almost kind of like the default in puzzle and platformer games to have some sort of portal.
Oh,
that,
yes.
It moves matter from one side to another. So I made this version of this portal, which is kind of like mycelium chain, like this fungus chain between one side to the other.
The idea for this actually came out of research about mycelium. Like, it's able to transport itself in a portal-like manner. So we were like, oh, and this would be amazing to try to implement.
Yeah, so I made this implementation, and in the crazy level 7 that you will end up getting to, and you'll understand why I call it the crazy level 7, chapter 7. But so that chapter already had like a bunch of different mechanics that our players are being like pulling their hairs out of. But basically, so I started putting all these things, and and it took me a bit to kind of figure out how to make the removal work really well on the other side of the growth, and then you remove from the other side and grows, and then it can split into different chains, and it wasn't fun. It was not fun. It was not right for the game. It also felt like this staple thing that every puzzle game needs to have. It's like, the game is. It makes it all over the place. It removes this idea of like you present an idea and then you examine it deeper and deeper and deeper instead of like putting more and more of different things. Mm-hmm. So things like that. It happens. You have an idea and it ends up being not fun. And I have a kind of a side that's the deleted scenes chapter that I have. It is by far the biggest chapter, the biggest scene in the game. And it's not in the game because it has around 100 puzzles. Some of them are pretty good, but it's not what the game is about, and they're just like waiting there for like one day. Maybe I'll look into them again. It's just something they just don't click, and it's even more than that because you probably noticed that there's a lot of backstory in the game, but the backstory is literally backstory. It's just in the back. It is never in your face. We never have a cutscene or a dialogue or a comic strip that tells you what the hell happened there in this world. But you get these graffitis and artifacts you see in the background and all these images and skeletons and all these things. It's kind of like, okay, something interesting is happening here, and I'm not even giving information in a coherent manner. And slowly, as you go through the game, you see more and more of these things, and in different places, different times, obviously. There's a story that developed there. And one thing that was very, very important is to kind of match the idea of the puzzle itself, to the story in a way that kind of, it doesn't look too arbitrary. You know, sometimes you just need to make a puzzle that's super interesting, super fun. So at the very least, make it, the materials are based on the scenery. But sometimes it really is ingrained in the actual puzzle. You know, in chapter 4, you'll see there's some crazy puzzles that really tell the story. You just go through a puzzle and don't even notice it, but that's the key to what happened in the world. The elements within that puzzle.
So why was that important to you guys? Because I like, that's another thing that I can imagine it would almost be easier to sell this to, like, you know, a crowd that's like super into indie games. Like, you know, I can imagine like that person who fancies themselves like, oh, well, I prefer abstract art and only abstract art. They want all of their video games to look like an Alexander Calder sculpture, and like that's their thing. And choosing to go with a sort of like post-apocalyptic sheen to sort of have a story structure on top of this is a very odd choice. Why was that important to you guys?
Wow, that's a great question. I almost can't even can't remember why, but it was just like, so it just pulled us in.
I think so everything sort of was built around the mechanic, and I know when Itai was doing the code behind a lot of the, you know, after the prototype, trying to figure out how exactly you control this green blob, how it grows, like what's the number of cells, like all that stuff. He was like listening to the Future Sound of London, and it was just amazing that we were able to get them to license the music for the game, because it sort of built out around their soundtracks, and their soundtracks are very landscape oriented. And I think it just sort of, we just kind of had it in our head that it was like this thing lived in that kind of world, and that world was very post-apocalyptic. And then when we layered it over, we know that it's like a trope, right? Like there's so many post-apocalyptic worlds, but we were interested in the fact that there were no humans here, and we were interested in the fact that, like, what does post-apocalyptic even mean if there's still life around? Like, is it post-apocalyptic, or is it post-apocalyptic because there's just no humans? And why is there a difference in that? So we wanted to take it more like that aspect of it than like, oh, the humans are still around, and here's society broken down to its evil roots. You know, it wasn't about that. It was about, like, who cares about human society if there aren't any humans? What is being good and bad? Like, people feel like, oh my god, I'm a horrible slime monster. I'm eating all these beautiful creatures. Like, are you? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's a good feeling to have, but, like, do those things have feelings? Like, are those things important out of context of, like, you know, there not being any humans? So, like, that was sort of what was sort of more important to us, is to, like, trigger those questions. And I think that the direction just sort of came out of the music, which came out of the mechanics, and everything just sort of kind of chained.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like this is one of those questions is you're asking me, and it was like, yeah, why did that? I mean, like it's true. I have no clear question except for that's what the game wanted. Like the game was not about this 8-bit pixelated assortment of shapes, which it very well could be. It just that's what the game.
The game wanted it, but I think we did after we fit it. We did pay attention to what it was communicating. So we were just like, oh, the game wants to be post-apocalyptic. It's like, well, yeah, but let's find out what really is important to us and how do we communicate that.
Yeah. But basically, it was clear that the game needed to be, there were a lot of contradicting things that we wanted to put in the game. We wanted to put a game that's extremely grim and harsh. Well, at least if you're human anyway, and some of us are, and so yeah, green and dark, and yet very colorful and saturated, and platformy, but with no control,
and full of emotion. Like there's nothing recognizably human in anything that's happening here, but at the same time, it's very evocative of everything that you just feel instinctually every single day. When you start to plummet into a giant pool of fire, like, no, don't.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is very much something
we strive to do.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to achieve that, but without being heavy-handed about it. It's like it's very, very. When people actually stop and look to see what these things, in the background, what they mean, I finally feel like people kind of understand where I'm coming from, and the idea of when people come to me and understand it, there's something a little pretentious about talking about post-apocalypse when the world is actually thriving,
right?
Yeah. It's the post-apocalyptic for you, maybe, but not for the world. Maybe.
Itai, do you think that the background is where story in a game should be? Is that where it's best?
Oh wow!
No.
Wow, that's a tough one.
You asked Itai, so I won't mention.
What?
I was going to say no.
Oh, Julia! No, hop in there. Tell me why.
It just depends on the game.
If you want to attack story.
I think the game, if the game that you're making, or some games just the story is such a part of it. Again, it just depends.
I think what happened for Mushroom 11 is really that it was a combination of a lot of different things. First of all, there's kind of like a storyteller and puzzle designer in every one of us, and at some point we actually experimented in different ways of telling this story, and it was at some point it's like, okay, you know what, if we would, not that it was on the table at any point, but if we were to stop the player and show what happened here, and give you a kind of a rundown. You know what? I've seen a bunch of those games. If I have the opportunity at that point, usually I click a button that let me skip it.
Right.
Most players and most games don't really feel it's necessary. But if it's there, and I'm kind of hinting towards it, and in telling you, you know what? You probably can't even understand the story. You know what? The story is a challenge in itself. The story is a game within the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
But here it is.
It's so. Sorry to interrupt, Julia. No, please go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, add on to it, it's so much more powerful when you give people snippets of a story and they fill in the blanks.
Yes.
That's much more powerful than me being like, oh, no, you had this idea, but guess what? No, I'm the designer. This is what the story actually is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we wanted to do.
Yeah, it's so funny. You're talking about how, Ite, you talk about the interrupting to like, here's all the background. Now here's a somber voice. We have Liam Neeson, and he's going to very sadly tell you what happened to the world, and it's really a bummer. Couldn't afford
Liam Neeson, by the way. True story.
I'm sorry. No, I hear him in Rob Roy mode. It just automatically, like, I'm brought back there because I'm listening to Future Sound of London and I'm 13 again. But like, you talk about like the interrupting for that, and Julia, you talk about how like it's all about the needs of the game, and it's strange to me. I feel like whenever there's a dialogue about story in a game, it's always as though it's something separate from the game itself. Like, people talk about the story as though it's like it is itself some kind of cancerous growth on what would otherwise be like a pure game mechanic, which is ridiculous. The game...
Well,
like,
sometimes it does happen, though, like, right? Sometimes what the game is about is not the same as what the story is about.
But that's a bad... But that's bad design. Like, that's...
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
And again, not to criticize other games, of course, but there is... and I think that was kind of our... Light? We need light.
I mean, maybe...
Yes. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
Ooh, light, vision, wonderful. So for us, it's seeing these games that, and I have a lot of people, sometimes games that I see in their infancy, and people coming to get some advices on games, and like you see games that are completely almost like. There are just shapes or just very, very basic mechanics, and people are already kind of starting to try to tie it in very forcefully to a story, and it's been done too much, and we all know it, and it's okay, all right, it's okay. But we felt, you use the term like this cancerous growth over the game or the gameplay, and it sometimes feel that way, and it's like two different things, and it's like a few brackets that you need to fill. All right, mechanics check, graphics check, story check, we got a game. And we felt like, you know what, this is exactly the opposite of what we're gonna do. You know what, I'll be completely honest, sometimes we see people look at the game, even reviews that see the games, like there is no story, knocking off points. You know what? Yeah, we knew that this is going to be the case. We knew that people are going to just play the game and not get it, and we're totally okay with that because we felt that this is truer to what we wanted to convey, and it's okay. This is the game. If you see this story, by all means, follow it. See if you can get the same feeling we had. Maybe not. Maybe you have something even better. That's great. We're not going to hold your hand. We're not even going to tell you if you got it right.
There is no right.
There is no right.
It's remarkable that you guys are saying that. You're saying that exactly at the moment that I'm pushing up a hill through a cemetery in like what is clearly like this emotionally charged moment in the game. That was amazing. But you were saying, Julia, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I think that if people are even remotely interested in finding out more about mushrooms or mycelium or fungus, like that's amazing, right? Like that's what like I would like people to take away with, like, if they're inspired enough to do, to try to figure out like all the really amazing things that are kind of helped make and sculpt our game. Slime mold intelligence.
So this is the good thing about the relationship between Julia and me. So this is what Julia is hoping
we have
to
different points.
Julia is trying to get into like this positive moment of understanding the value of fungus and mycelium and how fungus can help the world, and all these great research points that we've seen through the years, and this. We'll talk about the science behind it, which is a big thing that we're very proud of. And for me, this is like there's a point here, and I have a point that I was trying to make through the game, which is, what we are as humanity and what we do and what we deserve, And again, not to push it too far towards the grim, but but it's definitely, it's like, okay, there's a lot of things that I want to say, but if I start posting about it, or start having my views being given out in any format, nobody would actually care anyway. So I might as well just inject them into a game that I make.
I love that. Well, tell me a little bit about the science. Tell me a little bit about the research that went into this. You have this mechanic. How do you go about making that into something that's going to be, filled with scientific, if not accuracy, at least representing scientific theory in a realistic way?
I couldn't be happier about this question, because this is not to pat ourselves on the back or anything. It's just this is so insignificant in the game that we actually hit it out of the way in the areas that it's actually presented. But everything in the game is based on this parallel universe theory that is completely sound and based on actual chemistry. And we worked with doctors and scientists to make sure that these things that are scribbled on the walls are accurate.
Cool.
But you probably won't even see them.
It's not like if you were a scientist, I don't think you would have one of those moments that a lot of us who are programmers are when we watch like hacker movies where we're like, oh, come on, like we hope that at least they'll be like, oh yeah, you know what, that at least they were going for this theory or that theory, like it isn't completely unfounded. And again, it isn't necessarily such a big part of the game. I mean, again, I would love it if people would be like, oh, what the heck is funguses, but like it's not part of that. It just, like, we were just so, or at least I was really fascinated when we were thinking about, like, okay, because early on we were like, we gave it the title Mushroom 11, right? Because it looks like a fungus, it looks like a mushroom. And we just started researched all these different things, like how mycelium is able to not only have, like, plants being able to communicate to each other, but they're also able to pass different nutrients to each other, completely different species of plants. At the same time, they have an amazing capacity of implanting nitrogen, which somehow has something to do with sunlight. So you can get like a whole spore cloud of like mycelium, and you can basically fertilize a ground that would not be able to accept tree seeds. And it was just like all these crazy things. And they're also able to break, there's some mushrooms that are able to break down plastics, there are some mushrooms that are able to break down hazardous materials in a way that will make them biochemical friendly. So it was just like all these crazy things that are like, whoa, this organism is like amazing, and I don't like. It's a very
interesting thing. One of the things that we were noticing, again, not to bore you too much with.
Sorry, I
nothing about no. Absolutely nothing about this is boring. This is my crack.
About fungus in general is that it's again, I'm going to bore you with another thing quickly. There's an entire field in computer science called genetic algorithms. The idea is that those algorithms change really rapidly in very, very quick iterative generations of trial and error, mostly error. And fungus has a lot of similarities because their cycle is extremely fast and they're very adaptive. And in very, very extreme circumstances, they can adapt to no oxygen, very little light, and very different. And I don't want to give too much about what actually happened there, but a lot of amazing things happen when you can iterate and come up with basically a new species. And that was basically what we were going for. And we were trying to come up with, in order to create that species, what kind of observations would we see, and what kind of applications would people would start making, and then how would people try to abuse those things? How would people try to make money off those things? and how would that actually contribute to this world that we're seeing right now that's completely destroyed. So all these things are laid out in this thing, but we would try to make sure that at least the basis is there, and if you want to follow it up, you can find those cues.
It's so interesting to talk to you guys at the same time, because it's clear that you have, you know, not contradictory, but very different ideas about game design and what a game should do and what your interests are. And it's amazing, like, how those impulses have clearly complemented each other here in the actual game that you've made. And like, how, you know, what is your collaborative process like? You know, it's very rare for me to talk to a couple who work on artistic projects together. It can be a very fraught process. So I'm curious. Please.
We have 2 couples.
And it's true for both of us. Like, so Simon and I, all right, so we worked on it most of the time, while at the same
Kara
time
and I
we're basically supporting us doing that. But that's beside the point. So Simon and I, both of us are kind of like, we're more grim in nature. And some of the designs that Simon made were very, very harsh, very violent, and some of the designs that I did were more violent, and the idea of like this, you know, this is life and death, and finding the good balance between them. So for that, whether you represent life, I represent death, whatever. You know, the good cup, bad cup. I don't know of game design, but it's the iteration was extremely helpful, and also even in the terms of very basic game design and even tutorial, even like how to introduce some of the mechanics. It's like, you know, I push a lot of things really fast, and you know, Julia's giving a lot of balance and kind of like introducing these things. So I think it works really, really well, definitely for this game. But it's
I think having distinct roles really works well. Like, it's really hard to go in with somebody that you're really, you know, you spend a lot of time with, and then like having to fight over, like, you know, who makes the last call, or, you know, and also just trusting each other. Like, you know, like, I've worked with Simon and Kara for years before we started this project. So like, I would completely trust them to make the best decision when it comes to production, or when it comes to scheduling, or when it comes to art, or when it comes to, you know, art direction. And likewise with Itai, like I trust him when it comes to, you know, things that he can program, and things that, you know, the design of the game, and sort of how this all fits together. So I think that really helps in terms of,
and definitely
relationship.
Julia, and definitely you know, feed off the idea of like Julia has a lot of you know, experience in UX and user experience, and like kind of like the more educational nature of introducing new mechanics. So a lot of things really work well. So like I come up with things, and because I'm so deep in this game, sometimes I can't see difficulty. Well, like, one of the things that people tell me sometimes about the game is that it's a difficult game. You know, you'll probably notice it, but it's hard to kind of like understand difficulty when you've been doing the same mechanics for so long. So it's like everything is. So you want to dig deeper and deeper. And sometimes just making sure that these things are leveled out really well. So you need more designers around you to kind of like constantly question you. So this has been very good. In the previous project that we worked together, however, it was more stressful, like a lot of friction, but you know, kind of mostly in a good way. But sometimes it can be problematic to work on the same project. But in this case, it was very clear that, you know, there was a very clear jurisdiction here. So and call making. So it was okay. And everybody contributed. The four of us have been working as a real team. So it was really fun. It was really fun.
Well, I want to say right now, as I try to go through this volcano puzzle, God damn your checkpoint, you cruel, horrible people. No, we have just 2 minutes left on the show today, and I just want to thank you guys so much for making time to talk today while you're on the road in Chicago. And like, guys, this is just a wonderful thing you've made. I'm thrilled to be playing it. Is there
Thank
anything?
you so much.
Oh yeah. Is there
Thank
anything?
you for having us on.
Of course, and you're always welcome. Anytime that you guys have anything, please let us know. You can come back on. We'll talk about mycelium, and it'll be great. Is there anything that you guys would like folks to know about Mushroom 11 that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet?
Well, we're going to do translations soon, which I'm excited about because we're going to have it translated in many different unusual languages. Really excited and honored to have it translated at least into, I think, Inuit. I'm working with a company called Pinuik, which helps do a lot of First Nations games, and they're going to localize it. And then I worked with a really awesome group of people out of, I forgot actually the name, but anyway, it's going to be in Algonquin as well, and hopefully I can get it in Anishinaabe. So I'm super excied just to get it.
Julia has a lot of and her own background is based on these indigenous nature.
Cool.
So she's very excited about this, and it's great. But I don't.
I don't think
it seems like
Matthias
you're
is excited
no. She doesn't seem to be excited about the fact it's also going to be translated to
in like
normal languages,
like the things and Japanese and all that. So we're super excited about it.
But there are a few things that we're gonna add to the games and make sure that these things. But we're still gonna introduce new things, and so. Yeah.
Are you guys? So a Duke and Punk Rock Bob and a bunch of people here hanging out in the chat have all mentioned that they want to see a mobile version of this. Is that going to happen at some point?
Oh, right. We forgot about the most important part.
Hey, no. I want to be clear that the Algonquin translation is the most important announcement that we've heard here.
It really is awesome. I'm so honored to be able to translate
it is very unique, and it's kind of like
really
one of a kind. But yes, this is a little bit kind of off topic. Let's face it. But yeah, it's so the big project, the one that you already started, and it's going to take a little longer, obviously, is to make a mobile port. It's going to work well on mobile and tablets, of course, and it's very clear to anybody who tried one of the old prototypes or played the game on a tablet that it is really. Some say that this is the right platform for it, right? The perfect with the mechanic, and it works really well with multi-touch where available. And it's true, it is going to be very interesting, and there's some work to make sure that it's going to fit the platform and the audience and everything, and it's a different market. So we're going to work on it. Hopefully, get it released in a few months. We're working on hopefully beginning of Q2. That's the plan for Q2 2016.
Cool. Everybody, we encourage you to follow us here on twitch.tv/GamesRadar if you have not already. Go to GamesRadar.com. We have a bunch of cool crap there. It's cool crap. It's crap. But I mean that in the best possible way. You probably shouldn't call your own creations crap. Probably didn't think that through. We will be back next week with some wonderful shows just because Thanksgiving is happening here in the United States where we stream from. We will still have some good stuff for you. Ludwig and I are going to play a bunch of Beyond Two Souls. We're going to deliver a hobo baby. for you live. It's a thing that's going to happen. You can follow these wonderful people on Twitter. It's Untamed Games, at Untamed Games, and you can go buy Mushroom 11 on Steam right now. And man, I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to do it. And when you get through that volcano puzzle, you're going to feel like a bronze god. I promise you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It was fun.